Hello, I'm Ranjan Kumar, back again with my new video with our new guest for the day, and with the series of videos that we are making interviewing our international guests for the series called Moments with Masters. We have one more master for you, and with this brief introduction of our guest for the day, our guest, our
Yeah.
new master for the day, is a resource person for leading publishing houses in India, such as Oxford University Press, S. Chand, Viva Education, Frank Edu, and is actively with Orient Black Swan Private Limited. Well, he started his career as a school teacher at Little Flower High School, Hyderabad. He's a resource person at NCERT and Indian Association of Physics Teachers, Pune. He was also the director of e-learning division of Narayana Group of Institutions. He's a guest faculty at Osmania University Human Resource Development Center, Academic Staff College, and delivers lectures for teacher educators. He conducts workshops for teacher educators on communicative skills, professional development, integrating ICT tools in teaching mathematics, physics, physical sciences, and English teaching methodology. He has guided a number of students appearing for International Baccalaureate Diploma Program in Theory of Knowledge and extended essay drafting and presentations. He has trained the teaching staff of several leading schools in India and elsewhere of all kinds of boards on content enrichment, delivery mechanism, and teaching integration. He has published a book, Good Teaching in Action. He has trained the principals, administrators of several institutions and religious minority institutions on leadership in action. He is on the advisory board of several institutions of repute, and he's a resource person for Birla Education Trust, Pilani. He has done extensive work in incorporating technology in classrooms. He uses technologies such as Java applets, simulations, flash animations, videos, and PowerPoint presentations in teaching different school subjects. He has published a book, Let's Play the Game of Physics. He was a program coordinator of a workshop conducted by IITB at Hyderabad. He was the convener of JEE Mains Mock Test 2016, powered by TCS, conducted by CAD Consultants. He has conducted faculty development programs at several professional colleges. He has written a number of articles on education for vernacular magazines. And most importantly, he has a doctorate in mathematics and qualifications in physics, English, and education. He has a professional level diploma in training from the University of Cambridge. He is trained in SQAA for assessments by CAER and Center for British Teachers. Married to Swati Kameshwari, now working as a teacher of English at a missionary school of repute at Hyderabad. He is blessed with a son, Surya Teja, an alumnus of Imperial College of London Business School, and is currently working as a senior bank manager at Bombay. Now, Surya Teja is also one of the authors of the book titled Global Entrepreneurship and New Venture Creation in Sharing Economy, published by IGI Global. Well, this, I believe, is a very short introduction. I'm sure in the next 60 minutes that we are going to have this interaction with Dr. Ramakrishna Aduri, the master of the day. We are going to explore a lot about what actually makes him who he is. And that's what we are here for. And I'm sure we are going to experience those moments, those experiences which make this man who he is, a great trainer, speaker, and educator. Sir Ramakrishna Aduri. Over to you, sir. There is a lot that we have learned from you. There is a lot that we are here to learn from you. But, something that makes me very curious to start our conversation with is your email ID. And it's let me know why@gmail.com. Is there a story behind it? That really makes me very curious to know. What's the story behind your email ID?
When I normally go to conduct workshops, so let me first thank you for this session, Ranjan Kumar. And when I normally go to conduct workshops, of course, teachers ask me my mail ID so that they can communicate with me. And I ask them, of course, let me know why. They immediately say, no, we want to talk to you. We want to get in touch with you. We want to know something more
Yeah.
about this. I said, you take down, that is my mail ID. My
Excellent.
question is my mail ID. Let me know why. And, that's easy for them to catch, nothing more than that,
Excellent.
actually.
Long back, I learned that your life is a reflection of the kind of questions that you ask yourself. And I see here a man with a question as his email ID. So I'm sure you must have asked very tough questions to yourself to make the man who you are. And this gives me immense pleasure to have you as my guest on this video series, because we have been in touch on various other platforms for a very, very long time. And I've been following you. I've watched your videos, I've watched your talk shows and everything. And there is something very specific that I want to know from you. Where did it all begin in the first place? Where did it begin in the first place? How did it start? What made you curious about learning and teaching?
I did my graduation at a place in Andhra Pradesh, nowhere called Urbain. It's completely, I was a Telugu medium assigned schools those days. Mathematics was not a problem those days for me. Because my subject was mathematics, I was a primary mathematics teacher. But the question was English. And I was at the end of 1 year, principal called me and said, Ramakrishna, your math is all right. And if you don't improve your English, probably you have to leave us. And that was a big warning. And so I started learning English during the summer vacation, and without the help of Google and Wikipedia. That was a tough task, in fact.
I understand. I understand.
Learning English for someone who is from a remote village and picking up so that we can stand in a missionary school was quite a big challenge, actually. So somehow I used to buy books on the footpath, and all those second-hand books I used to read, picked up some vocabulary, the sentence construction and all that. I started managing English and all. And fortunately, over a period of time, because of the exposure I've got, both in the missionary schools and although in the press, of course, Oxford University Press and all, today I am conducting workshops even for English teachers. I go to different places and I tell them, of course, how to teach English. So it's all because, when you have the necessity, learning takes place much faster. One thing that's an underlying principle here, of course, the necessity makes you learn. So there must be a challenge, a threat. Then you will have the resolve, a merciless resolve, a strong determination. Yes, I should learn for survival's sake. So learning needs that kind of strong, push. And one can learn anything, of course.
I totally agree with you, Dr. Ramakrishna, that learning needs a necessity to be addressed. But I just have a feel that a necessity can push you to the doors, but then to keep you sustain your energy, to keep you continue for a very, very long time, there needs to be something more than necessity, and that is something that inspires you to continue for such a long time, influencing thousands of people. What was that source of inspiration? What kept you continuing so long?
It's something like when you evince some interest in doing certain things, as I said, primarily it is necessity, but at the same time you're working. So you are recognized, you are rewarded, and there is something else that motivates you, something that animates you and all that. But what I found is that when I was working in a school of repute in Hyderabad, the recognition from the parents, the recognition from the students, and particularly there is an area I learned my Vedic mathematics from a very young age, because my father was a mathematics teacher. So what happened there is I could even multiply two 7-digit numbers without, my pen and paper. I could give the square root of a 20-digit number. And, like I could do 10 calculations at a time on the board, like simultaneously. So all these things, perhaps, like children used to look with that awe and all, oh my God, who is he? Like, it's like, I still consider myself as a village school master of Oliver Goldsmith. Okay. Someone who could do several things, with totally unconnected things, actually. So there is a bit of recognition from the students and the management, colleagues and all that. My God, how do you do this? Of course, in a jiffy. So that probably could sustain what was planted earlier then.
Now, in the last, okay, let me ask you, what were the major changes in the field of learning and training that you noticed? What were the different, if I ask you to divide your whole career time into phases, what were the major changes have you noticed in the world of learning, right from when you started and right till this era, when, like, every street has got a trainer, and everybody would like to call themselves a trainer, and not knowing what exactly they train. So you have seen the transitioning of this entire industry. So I would want to know from you that era when you started this developing this interest of training.
See, when I started teaching, let me tell you honestly, I was afraid of my cohort. And, so I used to keep them completely in silence. And my classes used to be so silent. The children were scared even to turn the page because that makes noise. They were not making noise. They used to take the instruments and keep them out, not even opening the instrument box. So later I found that's quite preposterous, ridiculous. In fact, interaction is required. And when you are teaching, they should participate. And we should become co-learners with them. And we learn together, explore something. It's not that one is talking and the rest of the group is learning and all. I mean, that's something that doesn't work. The major change is today, most of my lessons, if I were to go and teach physically in a classroom, I put on questions and I explore. There are a lot of questions, and while exploring the answers to the questions, we learn. While exploring the answers to the questions, we learn. So sometimes, there are discussions in the classroom. We encourage, mostly in international schools, there is a discussion, there is a debate. And sometimes the discussions, they turn pretty hostile. And many times, they differ in their ideology, particularly when you are making leaders. And there is no consensus. And they agree to disagree on several aspects. And still, of course, with all the politeness and the obedience to the teacher and all that, there's a lot of discussion. And I just give you a few examples to substantiate this one. I heard a child asking me, "Sir, can you come prepared and teach this once again tomorrow?" I appreciate that. So can you come prepared means she knows pretty well I'm not prepared for teaching the lesson. And I give you one more example. What rather drives you as a teacher there? At the end of some sessions, of course, I normally administer a test. And there were a number of students, and my topic was theory of knowledge. I was teaching a bit of epistemology, a blend of both Eastern and Western philosophies. I administered a test, and one of the students, of course, he failed. I shouldn't have, but I did. I asked him, of course, why have you failed? I've done so much of work. My presentations, the sample articles and everything was, so much of work I've done. There is absolutely no reason for you to fail. Then I asked him, of course, can you specify and tell me one particular reason you have failed? He gave me a beautiful sentence, of course, which I remember. He said, I failed in the exam because you are my teacher.
Oh my goodness.
I repeat this one. I failed in the exam because you are my teacher. And I asked him, of course, can you elaborate? Because I'm not, trying to, say anything about this one. Please elaborate so that I can understand. Because that patience you should have when you're teaching in an international school. You can't be harsh to a student. You can't be rude. And you should understand if this is a sensible one. Like, then he said, sir, no doubt I know you are a scholar, but I was not connected with the content you are teaching. I was not connected. You didn't motivate me. You didn't tell me how this is going to be beneficial for me. And I said it was very reasonable, of course. And therefore, you should allow a child to talk freely. And probably that is the first step for your professional development. If there are no students who can question what you're talking, probably you don't grow. We can't see, I learned say 20 years ago, I can't carry forward with those methods and all. Methods are changing continuously. The content is changing. We are talking about so many changes as regards, particularly about the integrating the technology part and all. Then therefore, the methodology is very important actually, how you deliver. And you must learn that from the students. When you say, we are conducting assessments continuously in the classroom when they are learning, it's not to check whether the student has followed up. Check whether repeat my present state. It does no way mean his capabilities and all that. Come to the other side. If you are not able to deliver well, you don't get the result there. The poor assessments that you have seen, the poor performance levels of the students, is a reflection of you more than the student. And therefore, you have to think about, changing your methods and trying different things and all, and do some other exercise and ensure that, yes, you are reaching them. And that's the reason, of course, it's a feedback. Whenever you administer a test or give an assignment and give a project to them to do, or have discussion in the classroom or a role play or any of these things, of course, would give you a feedback how you are teaching. And that's sensible, of course. I've seen best of the questions from the students. Sir, you haven't resolved my rebuke. And sometimes the child says, sir, I'm not convinced. Sir, I am not impressed. Sir, you have to get your facts right. So these are all the reflections of the students, and they are participating. You can't take them, any for granted. I give you one example, actually, I was there to conduct a workshop at probably Bangalore. And one of the participants, she was a teacher, she said, sir, it's nice talking to you and doing pretty well, but come and teach in my class. It's not here. You see my students and take a class. We will understand, of course, how you can convert that into the practice, okay, when you go to my class. I went to the class because it's a grade 2 science class, and I really enjoyed. I said, I don't need preparation for that. And like any, a teacher of a conservative, I've written on the board, living things move and the non-living things do not move. Children were looking at the fan and saying, come on, how do you justify that? It's moving. Is it living or non-living? So your first point is wrong. If you don't give the exceptions, actually, your first point, can you come on, erase it? I pulled all the courage and I've written the second sentence that, okay, living things grow and the non-living things do not grow. Again, one child stood up and she said, sir, before I left for the vacation, of course, the building had 3 floors. I came and in the month of June, I found the 4th floor. The building has grown. Is it living or non-living? So your second point is incorrect. And usually what teachers have to do is they should go to the staff room and say, what nonsense are we teaching? It's a question of veracity in the textbook. There are so many questions from the students, of course, where you have to justify And each and every sentence that's given in the book, of course, whether it holds good or not. And therefore, when you have, like students who question the veracity of the textbook also, then you grow both in your content. You go and you do your homework, you come back and all that. Many cases, what happens, the teachers, they feel that, yes, an understanding of an Indian teacher, master, and no, but it doesn't work out. Now, these days, certainly, you have to give an opportunity for the teachers, and there's a creative mind there which can question every bit of what is taught there in the classroom.
Amazing, sir. Now, you just said, that the first aspect is connection. So what's been your experience and your transformation related to establishing a connection with the learner? Is it only a skill? Is it that art part of doing it? Is it that delivery part of doing it? Or like, what has been your understanding about that connection part of the trainer and the learner?
Usually, like when we go start conducting any session, of course, icebreakers and all that, like, we make ourselves comfortable. Give them the confidence. Yes, they can raise a question and they can contradict and they can seek any clarification. So they should be free, actually. See, it is something called, you should set that, like the tone, set that environment in such a way that they are comfortable with you. And usually what happens is, you see, it's, as I said, the moment the lesson is interactive, whether it's a training session or teaching part, make it interactive. Don't think that you are the one who knows everything and all. Many times it so happens our participants know more than what we know. And we learn from them. When you give them an opportunity to talk, we learn from them. Otherwise, our knowledge, whatever we have, it remains static. And therefore, when you are attending a session, it does mean that that should be an enriching one. And you should improve your knowledge, and probably you should improve your the delivery. And see, there are certain things, of course, because as you said, there is a subtle difference between teaching and training. Adult learning principles are completely different. Sometimes they want to play with you. Sometimes there is an identity crisis. They want to be recognized and you should appreciate them. They want to demonstrate what they know and all that. So these are all the things, of course, that you should learn to handle. But what probably in teaching is, you don't have many such challenges. There may be a few students, of course, raising and this one, but adult learning principles, of course, they are very, very complex in nature. And one should learn, particularly in training, how to handle the people, because it's not the content you are transferring the knowledge. It's not that. It's much more than that. It's an organic touch, and you are dealing with the people. And once the people believe that there is something to learn from you, and of course, the stage is set for you, you can just play with them. And initially, that you should give them the confidence that, yes, there is something from him to learn. The first 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you can earmark for establishing that right connection between them. And if they're comfortable, everything goes smoothly, of course.
I'm sure, Dr. Ramakrishna, you will agree with me that either whether it is teaching or training or coaching or anything, there's like, on one side you have the skill part of that, on one side you have the human side of that. And in the last few years, with the a number of certifying bodies coming up, and everybody getting certified as a trainer or teacher from somewhere, and there are people who have become experts at all the understanding of the technicalities of training. But then there is the human side to that, of that, of that, creating that authentic experience of learning, and which I'm sure has to do with the kind of person you are and the kind of experience that you bring to the session, to the learning environment. So I'm curious to know, like, what has been your personal journey of transformation in these years of teaching and training?
Well, I just tell you, in fact, training is a word which is misunderstood by many people these days. And it has come down to that level, even they call public speaking as a training. Okay, there's no line in between. And if they train you about, say, eye contact, gestures, and, like something to start with your anecdote, and they think that this is training actually. Like people who are comfortable to talk, it's training. Unfortunately, we can't. They certify them, and people, they just have a badge and they say they are certified trainers and all that. And I don't consider them, of course. They go to places, they don't get the appreciation of intellectuals. If you go to government schools and all of them, they clap for you for 10 minutes. I don't consider it as you are recognized. And if someone gives you an applause, even to me or to anybody, you see who is doing that. And that is important actually. And suppose I put a post somewhere and all that, people say super, excellent, and this, that. Immediately I laugh at them because I see the spelling of that super also. I see that what they mean by excellent there. I see the spelling of excellent. So, but unfortunately, people are getting carried away. They're seriously taking up as a profession, but they're not getting anything out of it. And many trainers, as you said, of course, many are disappointed. They can't take it for a long time. Only thing is when you go and ask for some session and conduct that 1 hour, 2 hours and all that, and everything is called motivation. I don't know whether people are really getting motivated or not. They call it's a motivational speaker. There are no definitions for them. Personality development has no definition, unfortunately. It lost its charm. But I tell you, like, when you go seriously and give the skills, definitely you should think of the outcome, output, and impact. All three of them there. See, when you go as a senior teacher, I can understand, you can measure it, and the change is perceptible. The organization is getting some benefit out of it. Otherwise, they don't call you again. If you're going as a trainer to organizations, it's an indication that there is some benefit they are getting out of it. And people are there as examples. There are role models in the field. And regarding my experiences and all that, as a teacher trainer, I started with Oxford University Press. When I used to go to any school, either in India or outside, my introduction used to be very simple. He is from Cambridge and for Oxford. A qualification from the University of Cambridge and working for Oxford University Press India. So these two set a level for the training program and all that. And therefore, people at least used to initially, okay, let us bear him for a day and see what is going to come. Okay, 6 hours, but holding the interest of teachers and learned people, and they're all discerning learners and all that, 6 hours, it's not that easy. Let me honestly tell you, see, 1 hour, 2 hour online programs these days, conducting a small webinar and all that, 1 hour we can sustain, but 6 hours, if you make them sit there quietly and all that, I just tell you the success of any trainer, it depends on the humor part of it, making the situation a bit lighter. And, it's not a serious atmosphere and all that where you're dumping so much of content and all. Let the content be less and make sure that it reaches them. Let me tell you one thing. When you're conducting a training program, the first one is we do it for the cognitive development, intellectual development. You transfer the knowledge And that's one area we are talking about. The second one is attitudinal transformation. What is the behavioral change, modifications that are occurring and all that? Attitudinal change is the second one. Behavior modifications. And the third is skill building. On the dexterity or adroitness or whatever it is. The point here is when you are working on the cognitive development, you can prepare a PPT with 30 slides, 40 slides, and so much of knowledge, and people are not interested in that. So much of content you are dumping and the second one is, of course, the transformation. No pep talk, it's not working these days. But only thing I just tell you is that make them participate, let them realize, let them know that they know. They know it already. Just make them realize that they know it. Just bring it out. And if you are talking about any other skills, like, where using tactile learning or kinesthetic learning and all that, you just engage them. And the most important part of any training session is learner engagement. If you can remember this one learning engagement, and the session would be fruitful. And because when you are engaging the learner, immediately you will know what's happening. You need not wait till the end of the session, ask for a feedback form and all that, like nothing of that kind. Immediately you will know whether they're interested or not. Okay.
Now, let's assume that, a trainer or a teacher is highly skilled at engaging the learner and everything that the profession requires him to become an expert on the skill. Now, what do you think, what do you consider are some of the most important traits that help the trainer or the teacher create this impact that changes lives from inside? What could be these traits, and what has been your understanding of these qualities and personal traits over the period of all these years?
This is a very simple one. See, the theory and practice, you can't alienate one from each other. Okay, if you are talking about how to make money, quick money, you must be a rich man.
Exactly.
People see how you have come there. They see your car, they see you, the way you are dressed and all that.
Exactly.
And the properties you own here and there you're talking about. That's what we call it a conviction, actually. So when I am conducting
so where does this conviction come from, and how important is this conviction for the trainer to be able to make this lasting impact?
That's very important, actually. They say without that, people, they are listening to your words. At the same time, they see who you are and your background and your success. And I tell you that your narratives always speak about, they speak about what you are talking there, whether it makes sense to them or not. Or, like if you are not, there is no coherence there between these two. See, I tell you one thing, like I give you a simple example. What you are speaking has nothing to do with the way you are. People talk about human relations. That fellow, his file is pending for a divorce case. He has got a fight with his landlord for vacating the house and all. And he kept his parents in the old age home. He comes here and talking about the human relations. So if people know about this, they don't pay any kind of interest in listening to you. It doesn't make any sense for them. However good you talk about the human relations and all that transactional analysis, this ego state, that ego state, people are not at all interested in that because they know your background. See, it is not...
So this brings to the point, that you as a person becomes the most important element of the entire process of teaching and learning. And which again comes back to the core thing that I wanted to discuss with you is authenticity. Now, when did you first wake up to this realization of authenticity, of being what you actually teach?
You see, when you are teaching, actually, like when I teach students, there isn't a big problem, of course, because it's only when you are rich in your content, you can transfer. Anyway, you know the methods, we can understand where is it difficult, where is it easy for them. So you know how to divide your time and all. And when I feel that a particular concept is complex in nature, I spend a little more time to them because I understand that it's not easy for them. Sometimes I do some prognostic test. I understand, okay, there are some learning gaps. I should go back and teach some fundamentals and come back and all that. All these things come with some experience. Absolutely no problem. But the problem comes when you're dealing with adults, particularly teachers and all that in training. They want to see a teacher in me. So they are looking at me as a teacher and they want to emulate something. Can I do something like him? Okay, this is a good joke. I can share it in my class also. So they want to see it, pick up as much as possible, of course. So I tell you, like during my training sessions, it's not the web links I provide. It's not talking about the latest nuances and all that, about the content where they can get the resources and all that. Much more than that, they see the way you handle everything. So when you are talking as a trainer or a teacher, it's a live demonstration actually. Okay, so when you are conducting a training program on leadership skills in the session, you are demonstrating the qualities of a good leader. It is not that you are talking about the principles of leadership and all that. Come on, read this book, read that book, this scholarly article and all that. It's not. You are a live example there in the hall, and you are just telling them, see, yes, a leader should be like me. So that's a live demonstration. And I just, it's not bragging. And sometimes, like someone has written a few lines about me. I don't know where he picked up from. He said, sir, listening to you is motivation. Listening to you is motivation. We are not bothered what you're talking actually like. And the second thing he said, talking to you is education. Because in every sentence you speak, there's something that we have to pick up. There is okay, I have to note it down. And we love to work with you. And probably that can be an inspiration. I said, I definitely so working with me, probably, some people, they say that, sir, it's an inspiration. You don't teach. That's what is important actually. You don't teach. But they keep on learning. Teaching. But now, we are not talking about teaching. The focus is on learning. I just give you, I substantiate what. See, I may give a project to the students. He learns from doing that project. I give an experiment for him to do it in the laboratory. I ask him to read some article and he can go to the library and refer to the book and all. I just ask him, do it on your own. So these are all the various methods of learning, and everything is not coming from me. When we were probably students long ago, the teacher is at the center, and the methods were teacher-centric methods, and everything used to come from him. But today it's not that. Sometimes my students know more than me. There is absolutely no reservation for that. I just accept that because they learn from more sources than me. Like, I give them a web link, but they spend more time on that. I give them a book. They read the book thoroughly and all that. I read only once or just here and there a cursory glance, but they read the book. And therefore, present day students, they're all self-learners. And a teacher's role predominantly is to guide them. Don't think that everything should go from you and you have to dump the content and fill that not necessary and all that. And sooner they become self-learners, the better. And today, all the resources are available. But just initially tell them that, yeah, this is how you have to work on. Yes, when they get a doubt, today they're not coming to me because they know how to Google. That's enough. If they can find out a proper, appropriate resource, either from Kiddle.co or Google or whatever it is. Children are doing their projects by going to the site Kiddle.co. It's powered by Google, and it's a visual search engine for students, children particularly. So they are learning on their own, and that should be appreciated. A day will come where they depend very little on the physical presence of a teacher. And to tell about this one more point, actually, we have done completely away with the word explain in the classroom. We are not using that. If you explain, again, when he has another context, he looks at you. Where is my teacher? She or he has to explain. Now it's not that. Come on, you read, you understand. I build the skills and you understand on your own. That's what is happening. That's what is happening.
Now, for such a deeper understanding about self-directed learning, a teacher needs to be a teacher at heart. But I'm sure you will agree with me that there were days when majority of the teachers became teachers because they wanted to teach, and either that or probably once they turned teachers, they developed a keen interest on how to teach and how to connect and how to create this lasting impact. But of late, teaching, the very profession of teaching, is like, it's the last thing that you would do, or it's the first thing you would do when you have no other options. And it's just that rung of the ladder on your way to some other career. So 80% teachers are teachers who are just waiting for a better opportunity. And, they are either not seriously wanting to improve their teaching abilities and skill part of that. But then how do how would, in such a scenario, what can we help even them understand what they are doing, and what change can help them even within that existing scenario of theirs to create that little impact on the students or the learners, or even those who have just entered into training as well?
As you said, the passion is missing.
Exactly.
That's realized completely, and people have noticed that. Second thing is, even the pandemic time has deteriorated the condition, because the economic status of the teacher has completely completely damaged. Now you have to motivate them. What can motivate them? Perhaps the first and foremost one is only the pecuniary gains they are going to get. When a private school teacher is getting, say, hardly 10,000 rupees and all that, with a family of, say, one or two more children and all that, it's very difficult for him. Even for the survival, it is very difficult. But at the same time, I also blame the teachers. They are not interested in improving their skills. There are so many opportunities for them, particularly in this online teaching era and all that. They can go and teach at home, and they can do some writing work, and they can prepare some resources and sell them. Many times I suggest them, these are all the things you can make, you can sell them and make a little money. But unfortunately, there is a kind of, I can't use the word, but you see, there's a kind of lethargy, a relaxed environment. They want a government job, and they don't want to struggle in the private institutions and grow. Okay. And I tell you one thing, honestly, there are some teachers who handle JEE mains and advanced classes in some states. Okay. Like Kota and all that. Even Delhi is known for that. And some of the teachers who are in the age group of, say, 25 to 30, their annual income is more than 1 crore. They're teachers. I tell you, they're teachers. And what is the reason for that? They're straight from IITs with a passion for teaching. They start working out the problems. They create the problems, because JEE mains and advanced, you can't depend on the old sample papers and all that, because no question is normally it is repeated actually. So they create questions and teach, learn, practice, and I tell you, they are paid very well. So our teachers should think of looking at them. There is, teaching, there is no depth for money these days. There is no depth for money, provided you are that most wanted teacher, the skilled teacher. And therefore, that should be the real motivation. But I tell you, when you are, hungry, and, who can satisfy, and, the physiological needs. Okay, there is no, see that the tensions, anxiety, and you have a family to look after, and the money is not sufficient, and the institutions are not paying much, and sometimes half salaries during the, and therefore, if the teachers are given the basic security, like when you look at the Maslow's needs, they are at the first or second stage, the security needs, and they stop there. And how can you take the teacher to that self-realization level? It's very difficult actually. And therefore, I would rather suggest the teachers, the problems may continue. And perhaps my envision is that these online classes are going to continue for the next 5 years. It's a conservative estimate. People may say anything to it, of course, because, they all come to school, something happens, and again, all the schools are closed. Okay. And this drama continues for a few more years. And in such a scenario, what teachers perhaps have to do is, come on, improve your skills and start teaching some more children, and, online classes, and learn one more subject. And because perhaps when you teach 2 subjects, probably the parents may like it as a combination and all that. And that is very important actually. And people should think of improving their skills despite the conditions which are not supporting them. That's the only alternative they have got.
Now, when you spoke about this hunger, there is one more hunger, and that hunger is of learning. That keeps you pumped up, that keeps you inspired, that keeps you go anywhere to get the knowledge and wisdom that you want to get. My question to you is very straight. What keeps you hungry?
I fortunately, like having been in the profession for quite a fairly long time, my basic necessities are met. Okay. And basic needs. This is a stage after 3 decades of experience. What is that I want is that this is the time for me to give back. Okay. When I conduct a workshop and all that, I just feel that, yeah, some more should become more, they should have more competencies and more professional in nature and all that, and more acceptance from the students and all that. And ultimately that gets converted into a little more money. So I just tell them one thing, like, whenever I go, my motivation is very, very simple. Learn. Of course, yearning is there. If you stop learning, if you think that this is sufficient, you don't even stand at that place, you go back. And particularly, this is a transition time for the teachers. We are talking about cloud computing, big data analytics, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and, deep neural networks and all that. I tell you, like next 2 years' time, you will become redundant. Nobody cares if you want to be there. You will be pushed aside. And therefore, you should keep running. And that's what I'm doing, for my survival sake and all that. I was at an institution for helping them in using technology. And a social study teacher is coming and asking me, sir, how to calculate GDP? Is there any animation for that? See, asking, anybody can ask anything actually. I said, what is GDP calculation and how do you think of an animation for that? I said, so you should start working on these very piquant conditions and all that, like which can put you in a very embarrassing condition and all that. Like people ask something and probably you don't have an answer for that, but still you have to try for answering such things and all. So it's only like the sustenance, survival, and the learning. Of course, it should happen continuously. And there must be a sign when you sleep, like what have you learned today? Because that question probably, like, you don't get the sleep, you get up and start reading something so that, you know, like you can keep abreast of the conditions and all that. Like, people have to learn. It's a necessity now these days. Like,
now, although it's a very humble way of putting it that, you know, it's for survival, I'm sure if it really had been for survival, you wouldn't have gone to the level of learning so much. You know, at a level of survival, people just say, like, if this is enough to give me food, then that's okay. But this was something very interesting which you shared, that, you know, the question that you should ask yourself is like, what have I learned today? And of course, that there, you know, I would want to know from you, when did, you know, how did it happen? You know, were you curious right from the very beginning, or there were some experiences, you know, which you would want to share with us during your phase of learning?
I just tell you an interesting fact of my career. I changed about 30 jobs. Okay. So I'm too sensitive. If someone says something, I said, come on, you take it. Either should I go now, or should I stop coming from tomorrow? So that's the condition. People don't take me now for two different reasons. One, this man is very unstable. Okay. That's number one. And second thing is, if he leaves, that's a gap which can't be filled, because everybody wants him only. Like, everybody wants him. Like, if you bring him, what has happened actually, like, you know, because no one, you know, like, see, another thing is, when you are changing the jobs, particularly in the teaching profession, every time you have to prove it's a new environment.
Exactly.
And it's not that you have to impress. Impressing doesn't work for long. You have to get the results. So whenever I change a job, whether it's a 2 months job or 1 year job or whatever it is, you have to carry your file, go in a line, and give an interview, answer the questions, the stupid questions asked by the other person. And this drama you have to undergo and go there. And again, it starts. Oh my God, someone has come. And he's a master teacher and all. So probably that when I say survival, there is a component of that which is sustenance also. Right? You know, there is a survival and sustaining that. Second thing is, when I go and start working in a school, the expectations are very heavy. And people, you know, like, see the silly children, of course, you know pretty well, applying for a 4th grade change. And that can be a challenge for you. Because when people believe that you can answer all the questions, they keep on asking some questions which can put you, of course. And therefore, I answered several such questions. And I also have learned how to escape from such questions. Evading the questions also is a built-in mechanism, actually. Like, you know, at least tell them, please, I will answer this question tomorrow, and I have got another class and all that. So you have to learn several things to maintain the standard and the benchmark you set. Once people, you have to struggle. People have labeled you that, no, he's a teacher, of course. There is no comparison. He's a matchless. And after reaching the stage, you have to be S.P. Balasubramaniam and practicing for 9 hours a day. But to record one song, your practice should go for 9 hours, because you already established yourself as someone who is, of course, they raise their head to look at you. I just tell you one more small example. Professor Walter Levin of MIT, at the age of 68, he just tells you, I did this experiment yesterday in an empty class 5 times. I did this experiment for an empty class. I taught the lesson 5 times. And today I am here. You are there. And that's what is passion. When he says, I'm teaching physics for the love of physics. For the love of physics. And when you see, I just tell you something interesting here. I got the first internet connection in Hyderabad to my home. And those days, paying 17,000 rupees for the modem and 256 kbps speed, and you have to wait for a long time for this to open up and all. And I started working on one aspect. How can I make this easier for the child? That's the one single criterion that motivates you. Can I make it easier? Can I show something? Can I show something, a demonstration? So when you have abstract concepts, when you want to provide that visualization to the child, and today I know my class it's an ensemble of resources from 20 different, 20 to 30. Only thing, the sole aim is to make it simpler. Come and see it. So these are electrons moving upwards. The current goes downwards. You show them, yeah, now I am moving the magnet. The current is induced. They need not, imagine everything. Like everything is concrete and a visualization is provided. I can build a molecule. I can show them the mechanism of an organic, this one, and I can show them changing the parameters and the animation and all, and working with the simulation. And that makes my classes sought for. See, the technology component, why I say my lessons are 10 years ahead of my contemporaries, it's very simple. You bring everything live as much as possible. If it is possible, do in a tangible things and all that in the physical environment. Otherwise, provide them in a virtual environment. There are today several things available, the virtual laboratories and all that. You can do an experiment in the classroom. You can just literally do anything in the classroom. And that is what is important actually, to make your sessions rather different. And there is no comparison for that. That's what students look for. That's what, as a trainer or as a teacher, when you're telling with all the, as you said, you're using the word authenticity. The authenticity, like you append your signature of excellence and say that a lesson ought to be taught like this. You have redefined the way a lesson has to be taught, the way a training has to be delivered, the way you bring in a change in there. And that is, sustainable. And many people, they say one thing, sir, we haven't learned anything today. We haven't learned anything today, but we have learned that there is much to learn. You have defined the scope of learning. We can't sleep today, because when we understand our condition, in just juxtaposition to what you are doing now, we have understood that this gap, and that is enough. A teacher, when you go as a trainer, you need not give them everything that is under the earth and all. You can't put in, in a small package your 20 years of experience and all that. Just to show them there is a next level to you. Enough. If they can understand that there's a next level, and all those who have got some kind of satisfaction that they're doing the best, it's completely shattered. Till now, it is something like, you pull down their confidence. You bring them down and tell them, of course, there is much more to be done. Don't get satisfied. In your small village, in your small school, you are getting, say, the appreciation of the students and all the parents like you. But You are only a popular teacher. You are not the best teacher. Just because the people have appreciated you to that length does not justify that you are the best teacher. Never ever come to a conclusion. And remember, there is a next level. And if you can move to the next level, your students would be more fortunate. And when they go to university, they remember, oh my God, my teacher taught me in my primary class this one. He was showing this one. That's what is interested actually.
So the first important question is to be able to identify what did I learn today. And the second most important to become an effective trainer is to help people identify the gap and fill the gap and drive them towards this self-directed learning, and also to be able to show them that there is a next level which they'll have to strive for. My question to you is like, we, to some extent, we say that, I learned this way and this is how I exposed myself to life. And these were the circumstances that makes who I am today. But there are a few people who definitely inspire us. And we subconsciously want, to emulate like them. Were there any people in your life, like those who truly inspired you or inspire you at present, and what was the influence that you got from them?
That's really an interesting question. I told you earlier one important point actually. When you go to conduct a session, it's not that you are, training them, they learn. It's not that. You also learn, we also learn. Okay. It's actually like, I learn from people because I sit in classes. I get the, an excellent opportunity of sitting in classes. When they're teaching live, maybe for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I see them actually like, and many times I get really amazed what they're doing. Okay, the active learning strategies they're using and the language they're using and the connections they're making, and everything is fantastic. And there is something to learn from every teacher, particularly when someone comes from outside, like me, a resource person coming from outside. Definitely they come prepared. They want to show the best side of them. And, like sometimes I see teachers who take the profession so seriously because they are not, that's not their primary income. They are into the profession, not for income, but for outcome. I've seen such teachers. And one teacher, I just asked her, please introduce yourself. And she says, I sing, I dance, I play, and I teach occasionally. I said, you are a teacher and you're telling teach occasionally. Teaching occasionally, please, it's totally perplexed by this. She said, there's nothing to, I use singing, dancing, and playing for my teaching. My teaching is a blend of these three. My students, they write lyrics, what they have learned, and they compose music and sing a song. I have games to play to teach the serious concepts. And I dance in the class shamelessly. I don't even close my doors. And without these, the spicy elements, there are certain classes where there is a dry teaching. Very rarely I have them. But whenever there is an opportunity to incorporate these things, I don't miss my opportunity. And therefore, teaching is all about, I took a clue from her, and my book's title is Let's Play the Game of Physics. When I have written a book on online resources of learning physics, I said, if I give, say, online resources, it may not be catchy. I said, it's a game first. It's a game. First you enjoy. Whether you win or not, that is secondary. Playing the game itself is something that, okay, gives you that. And I said, all the lessons, no matter at what level you teach, it's grade 10 or grade 2, whatever it is. That's why I said there's a lot of music should be there, because lower classes children, because the right mind is the right compartment is, of course, is dominating. They learn from music, they learn from singing, they learn from colors and all that, like, you know, make your classes interesting and all that. Like, and once they get that interest, like, you know, in all these, the methods you are using, different methods. I've seen a teacher, and for teaching tables, mathematical tables and all, she was using the percussion instruments. She carried the drums to the class. She was playing on the drums and all the children were reciting the table. See, how can you forget an experience which is normally not seen in a conventional class? I've seen such classes, not one or two. There are many, many teachers, and I've seen teachers who simplify it. I've seen teachers who give relevant examples. I've seen teachers, you know, like who put the thought-provoking questions. And I've seen teachers who speak language at a particular level, and they encourage the student, come on, use these words. And, you know, like, the most interesting part is that in one of the international schools I went, there is a teacher who was some time ago, he was a national player. And in the classroom, he is a teacher of economics.
Fantastic.
And that's the contrast. And therefore, when I go, I just tell the teachers, where is your second side? You should have a passion. You may be a mathematics teacher, but you play guitar, you are a member of a band, and you go, and when you go with the orchestra and all that, like, people appreciate you, of course. So each one of us, we have a second side. I've seen teachers who have got the second side. They are, you know, like, it can be a strong source of income also. A drawing teacher in the class, if you, on the face of it, he's only a school drawing teacher. Okay, he teaches the fundamentals of drawing. But at the same time, he sells his paintings, and his paintings are worth, say, 40,000, 50,000 on a small A3 sheet and all. And that is interesting, actually. And therefore, children also think that, oh my God, my teacher has got, see, this exceptional ability of doing something else. And that's what is interesting, actually. And therefore, this diversified, the talents and all that would definitely attract the children. And they appreciate it. Oh, my teacher, he's good in the classroom. He's also good in the field. Okay. And that's what they like. And they start, I don't use this word, doesn't look nice. They start worshiping you. And you are a role model for them. And therefore, when you asked me, is there one person or two persons? There are many. And I acknowledge to each and every teacher I have met and all. And they have taught me how to teach. They also have taught me how not to teach. Okay, so everybody is an example for you. This is a good example or a bad example. Let's say everybody is an example for you.
This was a huge value you added today, Dr. Ramakrishna Adduri. I'm really most grateful to you for accepting my invitation to come onto my show of Moments with Masters. And you truly are a master. And I made the best of my efforts to learn from you, to learn all that what makes who you are today. And probably everyone who's going to watch this and listen to this is going to have some impact deep in his soul. And probably I wish you all the best in your career. I wish you all the best in your learning, your journey of training and learning. And this was really, a very authentic experience of learning, and from your own experiences, and all that, the nuances that we miss, in our life, in a general life. Probably there were many things which you shared with us. We are most grateful for sharing that, what makes Dr. Ramakrishna Adduri who he is. And there is a lot to learn from you, and probably all those budding, aspiring trainers and teachers would definitely learn from the sneak preview that we got into your life, into your mind, and into your skill and your education of life as well as learning. Thank you so much, Dr. Ramakrishna, for being with us and for sharing everything that you have shared in the last
Thank you
over
very
60.
Thank you very much. It's really wonderful talking to you. And if this part is useful to anybody, of course, I'm blessed, in fact. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you.
Ramakrishna.
Thank you so much.